Voltron will be back after these messages. And now, back to Voltron, Defender of the Universe.
Welcome, Voltron fans. This is Mark Morell, your host for Let's Voltron, the official Voltron podcast. I'm here for another exciting interview with somebody who worked on the original show, Voltron, Defender of the Universe, back in 1984. So I'll bring on my co-host, Greg Tyler. Welcome, Greg.
Hello, Mark. Hello, Voltron viewers and listeners across the universe. It's great to be back with you, especially with this fine person who we had the pleasure to speak with at VoltCon 2022. He's now joining us on Let's Voltron, the official Voltron podcast. Mark, you want to introduce our special guest?
Yes, so we are talking to Steve Sterling, the producer of Voltron Defender of the Universe in 84 through 86, and he's also a principal of imSterling International Media and Management. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Really impressive what you guys are doing. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. Yes,
very
much so.
The time at VoltCon was just so incredible. I mean, on my end, it was sort of humbling to see, what's really come of it all. But just the level of fan enthusiasm and, just the legacy of it all was really impressive. And the authenticity of it was very cool.
Yeah, we had only dreamed way back when of there actually being a Voltron convention. So this is awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. And you're 10 years in, right?
Yes, we are. We're going to be celebrating our 10th anniversary towards the end of this year. And of course, at VoltCon 2023, we want to make a big impact with that 10th anniversary. Yes, we do.
Yeah, that's great. As well you should. Yeah, that's cool.
I wanted to go back to what Greg had started with you at VoltCon 2022, some of the things that you guys had managed to talk about. By the way, that video that was there was recorded by Pete White, and we want to thank Pete for providing that.
Yeah.
And, also, Greg, why don't you lead in with one of those questions that you had asked at VoltCon?
Oh gosh, well, so for the many people who had not been at VoltCon. If you were to introduce yourself to Voltron fans around the world, how would you? What would you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm, this far down the road, I can say I've sort of demonstrated I'm a serial entrepreneur in entertainment technology. I was always interested in technology anywhere along the way. Not so proficient at it, but very curious about it, and what people can do with things. And I did find my way into the entertainment business. I went to college at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then went on to New York City to try to, find a career in, at that time, television. And really wanted to be in entertainment, although it didn't. I grew up in Pennsylvania, so New York was closer than LA, and it never occurred to me until I got into New York that New York was mostly about news and sports and soap operas, and not that much about entertainment. So I landed in the wrong place, actually. But I did get in. I got myself into ABC television network, oddly, as a revenue analyst, the most boring job in the world, but was able to work my way across to the production side and became a production manager in the sports department. Then I was ultimately became head of worldwide operations for ABC Sports and moved over to news and said, I just got to get myself into entertainment. So anyways, I had to make the big jump to LA. And from there, I was really banging around just trying to be a producer. And that's sort of what ultimately led me to get on with Voltron. So it's now I'm really involved in a number of different companies. I've got 3 different, I'm on co-inventor on 3 different software patents, none of which have made me any money, by the way, but all interesting developments along the way. And I'm very involved right now in holograms, or what's being called holograms. They're projection or display holograms. So I'm involved in a company in Amsterdam that manufactures display holograms. I'm involved in a company out of Houston, Texas, called Base Hologram. We've done a Whitney Houston hologram concert, Maria Callas and Roy Orbison, Buddy Holly, pre-pandemic pretty much put a dent in everything, but that's all getting back up. So I typically get involved. I'm not the 0 to 40 guy in entertainment. I'm the guy who I can see somebody or find somebody that's got something underway, and they sort of gotten themselves from 0 to 40, and then I can sort of help them get themselves together from intellectual property rights, distribution, different sort of financial considerations and stuff, and then sort of get them to the next level. So I've got 4 different companies that I'm involved in that do various things. I'm in partner with a couple guys out of London that do very high tech magic with holograms and lasers, and put a touring show together for them. The company out of Amsterdam, based hologram, and my main company, imSterling International Media and Management, is just more of an umbrella in which I can sort of pull in things if I see something that I think has a really good opportunity, and get on with it. So that's why I sort of say I'm a serial entrepreneur in a way, because I will go find something or see something or find there's a market for something, and just go try to meet the people who are involved in something and see if I can get involved with them and help them along. So
So you must be very active in reading on cutting edge entertainment technologies and just technologies and how they might apply to entertainment. Is that a fair statement?
yeah, I try to be. It's the most exciting time right now, because just what used to take a year and a half or 2 to show itself is taking like 3 to 6 months. That's good and bad. And a lot of people in my peer group that sort of stayed as producers, if they made it through the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and then through the pandemic, there was, and I find this to be true in a lot of situations, there was sort of that group that would say, whether it was the financial crisis or even the pandemic, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then there were the rest of us that said, oh my God, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I got to do something. And so you sort of start saying, okay, well, what is that? Where are we now? What's happening? So, I tend to, the good news and bad news is I have a short attention span. I read a lot of different things. I read Aviation Week and Space Technology just recreationally, but it's amazing how much stuff you see in something like that. That's like, oh wow, that thing I read about 4 years ago is now in my kitchen. And even though it's more technology or aviation type stuff, I read a lot of different things. But what I've just always loved entertainment. I had a long run in the music business as a sort of an executive producer, more just packaging things, acquiring rights to things. I cannot hum a tune to save my life. I cannot read music. I cannot play an instrument. But I had a really good run, 15, 18 years in the music business. And it's as much about, sort of getting in the mix with creative people. And really just in a way, I think I probably spent a fair amount of my time trying to establish and maintain the environment in which the creative process takes place. I don't write music, but I was able to, another company I was working for acquired the rights to lots of different concerts, doing TV rights deals, web wireless deals and stuff like that. Because most of what I do is I acquire rights, and then I do all the deals, through all the different channels of distribution, because that's where the money is. And even back, and it'll bring us back to Voltron, and you guys will get a hold of me if I get too far afield, or you want to get onto something else, and we'll certainly get onto lots of Voltron. But what was really interesting is when I moved to LA from New York, I just left New York and went to LA, and it was it was funny because I was at ABC News, and I didn't really, news was very interesting, and I'm a news junkie, but it was, as a career, it was a life killer. Everybody I knew were either, not everybody, but a lot of people were, was rife with alcoholism and substance abuse, multiple marriages, all kinds of things, because it was such a stressful environment. News is a vocation.
Oh yeah.
If you don't really love it, it'll eat you alive. And I watched a lot of that, and I just liked entertainment because it was more fun. But anyways, when I got out to LA, I was lucky enough to get on a show called You Asked For It. Because I had been at ABC Sports and News, they were very post-production heavy. I got on as a post-production supervisor, which was sort of, again, that sort of the guy in the neck of the funnel where, everything has to come through there eventually. And so that really got me going. It was another intense thing. It was, they did 175 half hours on Monday through Friday. So it was quite a pace. And what I realized is as I got to know more people in LA, there's just a lot of people out and around, like, I have an idea, I have an idea, I have an idea. And nobody really knew what to do when they had an idea, even in LA. So it was someplace where it was a great place to have a lot of ideas, but it was a really hard place to have a lot of ideas because everybody had an idea in LA. And I used to call it was a land of 1,000 maybes. If you were trying to get an idea going forward on your own. And so I had actually had always been interested in animation. It was just, even as a kid with my parents 8mm camera, I was editing, and I did one of those little things where you sit in a box, it looks like you go down the driveway, and I did all kinds of fun. And even through college was doing different animated stuff, and just never gave it a thought of like, gee, could I ever do this professionally? I was much more thinking, oh, I got to get a job, real job, and was trying to do it in the television business at the time. And but I said, the heck with it. I just was with so many people say, oh, I have an idea, I don't know what to do with it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was somebody who said, I have an idea and I'm going to try to do something with it. And so I came up with this idea, an animated idea, show called Sharpie, the Golden Sage. And Sharpie was the Shar-Pei dog. I don't know if you remember that dog. Just had all these folds on it, just this layers and layers of skin. But he had this magic medallion that could, turn wrong into right, and it was a superhero kind of thing. I even had a soft sculpture of the character made. I hired a long retired animator from Disney to taking my own money and putting this into stuff to do some of the original character sketches and stuff.
Wow. Worked
with a writer, come up with some of the the basic storylines and stuff. And I was all over the place, and I could not get arrested. I mean, it was pathetic. And and here I am walking around with it. That dog was like, it was like 2.5 feet tall, big. Everybody wanted to hug the dog, but nobody wanted to buy the dog. And so here I am, I'm walking around, going into meetings with a stuffed animal under my arm. And anyway, the long and the short of it is, I got a call from somebody that I had crossed paths with at You Asked For It, a guy named Tom Batista, who was involved with Ted Koppler at the time. And Tom was a former CBS executive, amazing guy, really incredible, top-notch professional TV industry executive. And he called me and he said, Steve, and we had known some people in common from New York, because he was based in New York and, in the industry. And he called me and said, Steve, we don't want to do your Sharpie the Golden Sage thing, but we have another project that we need to bring some people on to, and we're a bit behind schedule. And, would you come back and talk to us about this project called Voltron? I was like, oh, Voltron, oh, sure. And anyways, that's what got it all going. And interestingly, again, because of my, post-production stuff and wanting to be creative and contribute something and sort of help direct stuff, I think I interviewed everybody, from Ted to Peter Keefe to, I don't know, 3 or 4 people in a matter of 4 hours, and started the next day.
Wow.
And so for me, it was like, I'm like, wow, I'm going to work on an animated project. And it was a very different approach to an animated project, because they were acquiring existing stuff, existing footage. And so that right away sort of, led us all, Peter Keefe, really leading the charge, with Ted sort of, putting the whole thing together, and then Peter really leading everything. Led us to a lot of discussions of, okay, Ted was the visionary, and you guys know the whole story of, Ted basically was originally trying to come up. He was well recognized in this small area of the industry of being an innovator on the local station level. And at their station in St. Louis, he was innovating with local programming where most people were just sort of feeding off the tube of their networks and then filling in with other stuff. Ted was like, no, I'm going to make some original things. I'm going to really demonstrate. And a lot of the stations said, oh, don't waste money on original things locally. You don't make any money. And he really showed people how it could be done. It was really impressive. So
had you ever rubbed elbows with Bob Costas?
Over the years, yeah.
Yeah, because he had gotten involved with World Events 80 back when they were doing that original programming for St. Louis.
Yeah.
And he also had his voice in one of the Voltron episodes as well. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, he did a voice in one of the 1990s episodes. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Wow, that's hilarious. Yeah, because some will say that I would say Bob Costas got to start there, but it was a great stepping stone for him.
Yeah, now you had mentioned that Voltron's a different kind of animation than was traditional for the time. Were you familiar with the industry doing that sort of thing up to that point? You know, there were Star Blazers and Astro Boy and
Battle of the Planets.
Things. Yeah, Battle of the Planets and various other things. So were you familiar with the concept by that point? Or was that fairly new? Okay.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, the guy who had You Ask For It, which was at that time, that's what was called a reality show. Obviously, the word reality is taken quite a few turns since then. People would write in and say, I heard there's elephants in Thailand that play soccer. And then somebody would say, well, you asked for it. And they would go off and we'd go off and shoot it. But funnily enough, the same guy, Sandy Frank, who was couldn't be more at the opposite end of the spectrum than Ted, and I'll leave it at that. He was amazing, by the way, incredible. But he had Battle of the Planets. So I was sort of familiar with that. He had You Asked For It, Name That Tune, ultimately, eventually Battle of the Planets and stuff, but more as a distributor. And we knew then that, some people in the industry would call it, it's the clutch cargo approach to animation. There was a guy with, a mouth that would move like this, and whatever they were saying, the mouth would just keep moving like this until they stopped, and then it would stop. And that was, we were sort of around, the circles relegated. Oh yes, that's going to be one of those Japanese overdubs. And we were going to sort of use the clutch cargo approach. Clutch Cargo being this other animated character from way back.
Right, and to those who are listening or watching us, if you're not familiar with Clutch Cargo, a more modern version of that might be from Conan O'Brien when he was on NBC Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and he would interview Bill Clinton or other celebrities where they have a static photograph and add a little real mouth with a voice impression artist.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for filling that in. That's a good one. Yeah. So, but anyways, it was, it was a whole interesting scenario because it could well have been, the Japanese overdub, but nobody was really going to settle for that. And, Peter, with various writers along the way, and that was a sort of a whole interesting dynamic in itself. Because in the early stages, of course, they were trying to get people with credentials, right? I mean, that's everybody, whatever you're doing, you want to have people with credentials around you, and no more place than Los Angeles and Hollywood. And so the writers really had, a lot of credentials, but they were, I say this lovingly, they were older guys.
Like Jameson Brewer.
And so they were on, and it was very interesting. Peter managed it beautifully. He was an extraordinary guy, Peter Keith, and but it was beginning to show that there was sort of this older, I guess, sort of grounding to what you would say and how you would do it and stuff like that. And so there was more of a discussion that really got to the point where we could say, listen, let's think of this really differently. Let's pull this all apart. We have an inventory of scenes. So we were getting the footage over from Japan. And as you started looking at everything, it'd say, well, I have an inventory of scenes, and I had worked in New York in soap operas, and I was sort of familiar with this idea of, listen, there's the living room, there's the dining room, there's, there are these scenes, and every character over a period of time only ever shows up in those scenes. It becomes a universe. And it really got to the point where we said, we could manipulate the movement of mouths right now, because we had such good control of, slow motion, reverse motion and stuff. And it really was, hey, we have an inventory of scenes now, write what you want. And, obviously stay within the characters and the storyline, but write what you want. And we can probably make any story work. And, when worst came to worst, we'd take a cutaway of something just to get past something or onto something else. And that way of thinking, that very sort of non-linear way of thinking, to me, among a small group in working on Voltron, are the ones that breathe this other life into something of this footage that was just coming over from Japan that could well have just been overdubbed. And while they were speaking Japanese, we would have put, English in their mouths, and, it might have done okay, but it never, ever would have become what it became. And the other thing that I think is, to me, was a seminal moment. And again, I will credit, Peter Keefe with just about everything, was this idea that we weren't going to do a cartoony soundtrack. I mean, yes, there were, cartoony being that, whoa, it was always constant, whoa, whoa. We had that. But between the music with John Peterson, who was amazing in his own right, and that, the sort of voice of Voltron, it was melodramatic, and it was sort of soap opera-ish like, but it drew you in, as you guys will attest, because it's like, oh, something's happening here. So we were able to distinguish ourselves really early on, and it was a delightful shock to all of us. It was like, oh my, because of course Tom would come back and say, hey, wow, look at these ratings, we're doing really well. Yeah, sponsors want in. Yeah, Tom Batista was I don't know how formal a business partner he was with Ted, but again, Ted was smart enough and clever enough to get this guy, former CBS television executive, very wired into syndicated television and sponsorships and all those relationships. And again, I think Ted had to sell himself into this guy, because I think it was a bit of like, he knew who Ted was because he knew local market television. But Tom Batista brought a whole other level of business approach, distribution, and sponsorship to Ted's vision for, I want to make it as an original production as I possibly can.
This whole thing that helped Voltron capture lightning in a bottle, right? You had mentioned some of those elements and the fact that they set themselves apart from other cartoons of the time, and that in order to make these ratings and get all these sponsors and all this merchandise going and all that kind of stuff, it really came down to all that hard work that you guys were doing in the front lines there, in the trenches, and making sure that stuff comes out on time.
The sheer mention of the word time, Mark, sends a shiver down my spine. It was brutal. It was really brutal. And, I mean, listen, it's very, the entertainment business is very seductive. It's very easy to come off like you're saving lives, or you're curing cancer. Oh my God, but it's fun. It's really fun. If you can get away with, making a living doing it, I can't believe I have all this time, honestly. But yeah, it was really, really brutal because, back in the day, they got off to a late start. Sponsors didn't know what to make of it. They were coming late. So, just the financing of it and all that stuff was, everything was late. And there is a tendency, I'm on a project right now, this hologram dinosaur project, where the original funders and stuff like, oh yeah, well, we'll get it going and the producers will fix it all from there. So it just all the time gets compressed. And we were I think we counted something like 34 days straight in the various studios just to try to catch up on the delivery schedule, because it has a voracious appetite. And what would happen was, you guys tell me if I'm getting too far in the weeds here, but
No.
you do an episode, you basically go through everything, you get the footage over. Everybody'd have to look at the footage. Peter and the writers were looking at all stuff all the time. Okay, what's the story here? They obviously had the translations and everything, so they knew where stuff was going. They knew all the character studies, that the characters were, well known out of Japan and were legendary in their own right there. And now it was like, okay, how do we shape it? We were obviously kludging a few things together at that. And so it takes a lot of time. And so, but what's happening is, you got to make delivery, and television back then was extremely seasonal, right? If you didn't make fall premiere week in syndication, you could just say, okay, good, I guess we'll try next year. It wasn't like, oh, we'll start a few weeks late. It was like, oh, it's too late, then you've missed the wave of audiences and all that promotion that goes with it. So that was really the challenge of it all. What, could we even make it? And we were fearful that we weren't going to make it, because we were delivering 5 episodes at a time, Monday through Friday. They were running in the mornings for kids before they went to school, and they were running in the afternoons when the kids came home from school. And you get a double run on the day, and it's the whole economics of that is what makes it work. And we were really, really behind, and we were just like, and it was like, being on the hamster treadmill. It's like, okay, we got those 5 out, because what happens is you schedule weeks in advance to send your episodes up on a satellite, and every station, across the country has their schedule. And they got their downlink coming down, and they've got people in their videotape room at that time saying, okay, well, Voltron's coming in. The 5 episodes of Voltron, which again, 5 episodes at a half hour, 2.5 hours of Voltron are coming in. It could be from, 1 to 3:30 in the afternoon, or it could be from midnight to 2:30 and then at night. Whatever that schedule was, because everybody was feeding their show to the local stations. The local station's obligation was to make sure they were recording those episodes so they could load them in their computer, they could turn them around. And if you missed your satellite feed, it was, you were hated by the stations. And you did it a couple times, and they were like, you know what, you guys are more trouble than you're worth. So it was definitely high anxiety. And if you go through the process, getting the footage in, looking at the footage, sorting out the storyline, the editorial, going into the recording studio with all the voices, and we were recording. We weren't even recording to picture, which was another thing that was quite bizarre for a lot of people. We were recording to time, stopwatches. I'll talk about that in a minute if you'd like. And we were just wailing on stuff. And we would literally turn around, take those recordings, take them into editing, clean them up in audio editing, and then take them into video editing and just start laying them in. And we had editors, day and night. We were working like 2 and 3 shifts of editors. And then the few of us were overseeing the 2 and 3 shifts of editors. And then we'd move into, final mixing. At that time, one of the selling points, again, Ted and Tom were all over this, believe it or not, broadcast television at that time was for the first time going stereo. It's a big deal. You laugh at it now. It's like, really? That was a big deal? It was not quite going from black and white to color, or, from standard definition to high definition, but it was pretty close. But the stations wanted to advertise that, now in stereo, and there weren't a lot of shows that were going in stereo. So we were behind enough and late enough that we could do it in stereo. And so that was part of, what we were setting up to do. So that was something new and different. And you'd go in the mixing room, you'd basically get all the shows edited. I would follow my shows into the final mix, and we were mixing all through the night. They came to sort of hate me. Well, they didn't hate me eventually, but I would say, because we'd be in these mixing rooms where people were mixing, albums and big stuff and big speakers, and it was just incredible. And then I came in with these little, 6-inch oval speakers that you could have in your car, and put them in a little wood box and put them up. I'm trying to put them up on the, left and right of this audio board, say, okay, great, play me the show through there. And the mixing guy would be like, what? why are you making us do this? I'm like, because this is what it's going to sound like at home.
Yeah,
We did
yeah.
all the multi-tracks, right? Sound effects galore. John Mortarati, the editors, the audio editors and stuff were amazing. And that was another thing about, Voltron was how real could we make it sound?
Yeah.
We wanted to make real sound effects when they happened, and really between the music and the sound effects and the grunts and groans that were actually the voice actors, we were trying to make it sound real. And then, I was the guy that said, okay, play it to me through these 6-inch speakers. But
Such an important thing that I think gets overlooked is
Yes.
not everyone had the latest and greatest stereo system because stereo was so new.
yeah,
You were the beginnings of a UX developer. You were trying to get that user experience, and you wanted the people that were making it to know what it's actually going to sound like.
I love that we all three are in industries where we all know what UX stands for.
Yes.
That's awesome.
yes, that is good. That is good. But it's funny because, again, just being around different areas of entertainment is, in the end of the day, entertainment is, say what you want, it's all about how it feels, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And how does it feel to you? And in the end of the day, big money entertainment is, how does it feel to you, the most amount of people I can possibly get?
Mhm.
Because that's ratings, it's it's impressions, it's users, it's all that stuff. And I have always wondered back then, because the audio guys were always razzing me, oh, here comes Steve with his 6-inch speakers. But I always wondered, did it make a difference when you got home? Did you hear something that if we had mixed it on these big speakers and sent it out, you might not have, because it was lost in the mix?
Yeah.
Was the mix going to be sort of boomy when it got home because we were listening to big speakers and it felt better that way? And
How's it going to sound 38 years later when we're putting those clips up on social media?
yeah, it's really true. It's really true. And so, even the sound effects and the body blows and all that kind of stuff that we were doing. And funnily enough, you guys probably know this, but, I remember when Tom came in and said, wow, it turns out we're getting a really good college audience, right? In the afternoons, college kids were sitting in their dorms and they came across Voltron. And because I contend, and, again, Bob Koppler could tell me I'm wrong, or he've heard it from Ted or somebody else could tell me I'm wrong. But I contend that because, first off, it was anime, and that was like really weird. Nobody even knew the word anime back then. But it was something very different as a style of art in animation. And again, that's another conversation. But we came back, he came back and said, we're getting an amazing college audience. And so it was a whole group in the afternoons in their dorm. We were running it for kids coming home from, elementary school and middle school. And it was sort of like, wow, isn't that great? And I was like, yeah, we can't do anything with that because nobody's going to switch advertiser to try to get college kids when we're really going after, the younger kids in all the sponsorship deals and stuff. But I contend that was an example of a whole demographic of viewers sort of got turned on to it because of the way it sounded and the way it looked. Because for them, it was, they were, a college age group. They were seeing something that was, sharp and really, something happening. It wasn't He-Man or She-Ra or, any of the other robotic superhero stuff going on. So.
Okay, so this is from one of the vehicle team episodes that you happened to work on, Steve, and this is speaking to the whole stopwatch thing. So you can see here in this is from the one of the last episodes of the vehicle characters. It's an episode called "The Drool's World Cracks Up," and you can see here this is a robot speaking in a voiceover, and this particular line has a little bit more than 1.5 seconds. And here's another robot speaking who has just a bit over 2 seconds. And then as you scroll down, you see the character Jeff and Cliff and Crick, and they've got their different time codes. And this is what you meant, isn't it, about recording from a stopwatch?
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. It's such a great visual aid. And it gets my heart racing again over it all. But yeah, so what was happening, because it's a crazy thing, but we knew we could, the way you would really want to do this is you would want the voice actors acting to picture, right? They're seeing the character, they're watching the mouth move, they can emote with it and they can do stuff with it, but we didn't have time to do that. It's because it's time consuming. And so he's, oh, I missed it, I got to do, and so we were sort of, not blind, but this was, if you go back to like, 1.50 plus, that little tiny plus meant you have a little bit of room, but 2.1 seconds, you don't have any room. It's got to happen in that slot because that's the slot we have to fit it in. It took a bit for, the voice actors. I mean, I would say they were horrified. They were professionals and they were game for anything once they got in the room. But it was, for them, it was like, I mean, I do think there were a few of them that like were, who are these guys that they are doing this so back asswards? What the heck?
Mhm.
So you have to sort of say, come on, just trust me. I'll show you when we get an episode done, I'll show it to you and you'll see what we're doing. So they're like, okay, but we were recording, God, by that time, probably 10 episodes before they ever got to see one. And then once we could show them episodes, it changed a lot more of what they were doing. But it was and we had stopwatches that went to the 100th of a second.
Wow.
And so I would be there with I'd say to BJ Ward or who was playing one of these other characters,
Sure.
you got to do that in 2.7 seconds. And they didn't know what 2.7 seconds was, but they knew the line and they had a feeling for the line. And then I'd say, yeah, you know what, you're 0.2 of a second off. And to think about that, you'd say to a voice actor, and these people were really talented, really well-respected voice actors, to say, yeah, that's really great, but you were 0.2 of a second off. Or you would say something, not my favorite one, but one of the weirdest things to tell a voice actor is, you're 0.2 of a second short, and I need you to say it, actually you're 0.2 of a second long. I need you to say it with more energy and be 0.2 of a second shorter, right? It's like, more energy, faster, less time. And it was just, it was really like coming in and just like, playing a game of, racquetball in a room, like whack, just stuff started bouncing around. You get everybody in a groove, yeah, you're 0.2 of a second fat. Okay, great. And you were the dialogue that was going on and the pace of it and what you were asking people to do. But once they got in that groove, because they were so professional and they were so committed and they got it, that was the other thing. Again, you guys talk about these little things that make a difference. That level of talent to bring in was substantial, and to have that level of talent and then have them so willing to roll with the way this had to go to get done was really impressive. And my time with those people were some of my greatest times in the entertainment business with talent. And they were all characters, and they had all worked on shows I had known as a kid, and they were amazing. Yeah.
You had mentioned before in your previous interview with Greg, when it comes to people finding out that there was a 125 episode contract here, all right, did that make a big difference to being able to get those types of voice actors?
I always have mixed feelings about telling the story because I mean it well, but a bit of the history is that, yes, we were initially, of course, there was a budget. So, how much budget could be spent on, on voice talent and who are you going to get? And so there was a bit of a question about that. And so we were doing auditions. Most actors, voice actors, certainly will come in and they'll do what they call a side. It's a side of a script, a page or two for nothing. They'll come in and just audition in the hopes they get the gig. And so we had different voice actors come in. They were named, they had great credentials, and they came in, and it was sort of like, yeah, okay, they're, and the question was, should we, use non-union voice actors if it was going to, really save the budget? And nobody was into that. Everybody knew that it was the union voice actors were the cream of the crop. They had the most experience. They were very, very professionals. No offense to the people who hadn't turned fully professional yet, but it was just going to be a non-starter. So but what was interesting is when a few of them came in, and it was like, yeah, okay, and I had talked to one of the agents, following up, and what'd you think? And I said, it was okay, but we're really under a lot of pressure here, and we really need to get some, really good people, and we're going to be doing like 125 half hours here, and so we really, and he said 125 half hours. You never told me that. And so, and he said, I'm going to send him right back. I'll send him right back. And literally, because they were driving all around town, going to auditions or hanging out at recording studios, waiting to see if they're going to get a Budweiser beer commercial or whatever. And so a couple of them came back. The agent called their folks, said, go back and audition. This is going to be a real series here. And they came back, and it was a world of difference. And I then came to find, and it makes sense when you think about it, but these voice actors, your vocal cords can only do so many things. I don't care who you are. And these guys and women are working in a mirror, and they're creating a range in their vocal cords, right? That they can do stuff, the pitch voice, right? Low tour, you look at the frequency range of the voices of the characters. And so everybody had a range, everybody had a character. And what was really happening was these voice actors, experienced as they knew they had different characters. They had different things that they could do with their vocal cords, and even different characters that they had created in the mirror. And these were top level professionals working it. They were really working their vocal cords and their acting chops. And so they weren't going to give up a hard-earned vocal cord character for a one-off. And so when they came back, it's like, wow, this many episodes, that could be a big deal. And it was a big deal. It was a really big deal. And the Christmas presents I got from them were really impressive. But yeah, that was really it. And they came in and they delivered some of their best voices. And some of them would come back, even come in, they were so into it, they'd come in and sort of, sell us characters, hey, I delivered this, I developed this other guy, this other voice, and I could do this if you have somebody, we'll get a character for it. And we'd make notes, or we'd make a recording, give it to Peter and say, hey, listen, Lenny Weinrib came in with this other voice he thought would be interesting if you have it, if there's a new character coming in or something. So they were totally in it to win it. And it was one of my great joys of life working with those people, because it was it was not, you could easily think that nobody was caring about the acting because it was all about the stopwatch and it was all about getting stuff turned around. But when we got in those rooms, in the recording booth with them, and they had their scripts and they got rolling, it was really, really special. It was really something. And I, for that time, I just loved it. And some of the fun things, like Michael Bell, and maybe you guys heard this story, but he was the voice of Butter in the old margarine commercials. It would be Parquet, it was. And he had you just hear different stories as they were talking to each other. And he was he had a place in Palos Verdes called Butter Estates, and then he had a place in Santa Barbara called Rancho Residuales. I mean, these guys were, they were great fun. And I also remember, this is probably tales out of school, but, well, it is tales out of school, but I always, LA was such a car town, right? Everybody had, what car were you driving and stuff. And, we'd pull into the studio and, these guys would be coming in like at that time, like, K cars or Dodge Darts or, just really plain cars. And I was like, I know what these guys are making from our show, and I know what they've done and what they must be making. And I've learned that Michael Bell has, Rancho Residuales. And I was always just sort of, I thought, well, I'm not going to ask, but, but anyway, so I'm literally standing around the water cooler in the kitchen in the recording studio. And I think it was Lenny Weinrib talking to Neil Ross, I think. and they're just talking, and Neil says, "So Lenny, you still have your Bentley?" "Oh no, I got rid of that Bentley. I got a Rolls." And and I'm like, "Oh, these are their bumper cars. These guys are just they're not driving their nice cars around LA. They're driving these little bumper cars around." It was like, "Oh yes, okay, these guys are living a whole other life outside of this." But they were just wonderful people, nicest people in the world. It was really, as they say, one of my great joys.
I wanted to ask a really quick question back on that script that I had shown you, and this is the very last page of the script. It's got a handwritten note about a narrator line. Did you do you recognize this handwriting? Is this yours by any chance?
I don't believe that's my handwriting. I'm trying to
Okay.
remember the woman's name who was the production sort of coordinator in there with me.
So I recently was looking at this episode, rewatching it, and was just following along with the script. And it turns out that the cut that they used with the narrator, Peter Cullen, actually used the word explosive. So that apparently they recorded it once with the word cataclysmic, once with the word explosive, and they wound up using that
Yes.
in the finished episode. So
Well,
it was just interesting to see that.
yeah, it sparked my my recollection that there were occasions where like cataclysmic was wondered or thought to be, that's a 25-cent word for preschool kids, and I mean kids before they go to school and stuff, and was explosive better. There were a few, we come across a few of those and say, well, that's a pretty polysyllabic word to use. But I mean, funnily enough, we were also adamant about not talking down to kids. I think that was another thing about Voltron. It was we weren't talking down to kids. We were talking straight out in sort of the emotion of it all.
It's amazing with the standards and practices and everything on how things really went down in Go Lion and how they happened on Voltron. Well, that person made a full recovery and they went back with their family and they're having a wonderful life. We can explain away anything.
That's the wonder of fantasy, though. Yes, exactly.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to mention is you had talked about how the writers didn't necessarily do a one-for-one with the original anime scripts. They were writing their own content to fit the visuals. And I would argue that there's probably no better example in the original series of how that was done so effectively than the very first episode with the lion-based characters. I was that episode, they actually resequenced. I believe you had produced that one as well, Steve. They resequenced and recontextualized a number of scenes in that show, and then spliced in footage from Die Rugger as well. Basically, in the original anime, we see scenes of destruction, and it's actually Earth being destroyed in a global war before the aliens come along. And in Voltron, they recontextualize that as being an attack from Zarkon on the home planet of the princess. And so, and by resequencing it and having some narration around it, the Earth is very much intact in Voltron, whereas it's decimated from the very first episode in Go Lion. And then by adding in some scenes to sort of cover for footage that had to be cut due to violent content, they would splice in some scenes from Die Rugger showing the top brass at the military discussing the situation of whatever it was in Die Rugger, but it was recontextualized to explain the situation that the Voltron Lion people were going through in that episode. And by resequencing the scenes, recontextualizing what was there, and adding something from Die Rugger, the end product is so radically different than the original anime, and it's so effectively done. So
and you just did such a beautiful job of explaining that. I will in the future, if given the occasion, want to explain it as well as you just did. Yeah, that's exactly, that to me was the the essence at the very beginning of what we knew we could do. What we realized we could do, but we weren't sure how it could come off. Yeah, thank you, Greg. That was beautifully said that way. But yeah, that was and listen, I actually thought there would be, you could do that a lot more with stuff. Just basically, in a positive way, taking things out of context, and using them to advance a storyline.
And I imagine that Voltron could I mean, certainly time was the greatest enemy with producing those episodes, but I imagine they could have taken that so much further if time had allowed. But
Yeah.
any can do anything with more time.
Right.
Well, it's a crazy thing. I say in the business here, the only thing that buys time is money, and it doesn't do a very good job of it. But there were some times where, I for one, went back to Peter, and, I had certain episodes that I don't even remember which ones they were. I said, Peter, if we get time, I'd really like to go back and just take another shot in the editing room with this episode. I think we could really, it's just like, he was, and Peter was great because he was ready to do anything that was gonna, just help make this more interesting, more exciting. But it was sort of like, you could roll his eyes. Yeah, sure, Steve, we're going to go back and open up some episodes, to, just so you can smooth it out a little bit or something. But yeah, that was really, the really exciting thing was that once we got a real process figured out, and we had the real talent in place, and you look, it's in a way, it's that other thing of just, it's the wonderful coincidence of time and place. John Peterson doing that music, the sound effects editing, all this stuff that was going, the voice talent. You just look at all the different things that happened to line up. And yes, they were hired onto the show, and it was a business, it was a job. But what everybody brought to it, and what everybody brought in to bring to it, it wasn't something like, oh yeah, it's another job, I gotta go voice this again, or oh yeah, I gotta go, knock this out. It was, they became really interested and curious about it. And as soon as the ratings started coming out, you get that sense of pride of like, hey, we're doing something that, people are paying attention to. And I think it was also a little bit, certainly from my standpoint, a little bit of that Hollywood thing of like, yeah, you guys thought we were doing this Japanese overdub thing, right? And it was blowing the doors off other shows that had been doing things the way everybody in Hollywood thought they were supposed to be done. And
Right.
And we didn't. And it was classic Ted. He just put something together and said, I'm gonna get everybody together to make this work. And it was, that was part of the fun, I think, for all of us. It's like we didn't know what was going to come of it. You didn't know anything. And it really, then when you started seeing, listen, when I was driving to go see my relatives over a holiday, and I was seeing kids running through the street with sticks, yelling, "Go Voltron Forge!" I was like, "Oh my gosh, look at that!" It's like, I was like, "Wow!" I knew, and we were getting letters. We were getting lots of letters. I was one of the ones, and Peter bought into it too, where we'd actually make the writers respond to some of the letters. Because some of the letters were really, they are the things that give the story depth. What's the metal that Voltron's made of? Where does that metal come from? Where does the fuel come from? These sort of wonderfully innocent questions, and you sort of look around each other, who cares? But those kids care.
Right.
And when you can, even as a writer, even though you might not write in what it is, when you can imbue the people making this thing with a little more depth of where is it coming from, how is it, it translates in other ways. So anyways, it was just, that all of that stuff, to me is what added up in the most unlikely way to make Voltron have the heart and soul that it did.
And now 4 versions later and 40 years later, we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
And we might even be talking about a movie somewhere along the line here too.
I keep wondering about that. I was asking about it because listen, my business is intellectual property rights, and I was tracking it through the labyrinth of, bigger studio stuff of who had it, what were they doing with it? Oh, it was going into turnaround, it was like, oh, so yeah, and it's been deserving of a movie. I think what's interesting to me, if and I'll have to say if a movie can really happen, yes, the original Voltron generation will be there. But I think as happens, a whole new generation will go, wow, what is that? And it will compound on itself. So yeah, that would be amazing. Really be amazing.
We just got done seeing this past weekend Quantum Mania, right? The Ant-Man movie Quantum Mania.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
And it just goes to show that, you can take characters that come from any world in the universe and you can put them all together into a story and it works.
Yeah.
And it's visually appealing. It's emotionally appealing. And it has a good story that has a lot of twists and turns to it. So if that can happen anywhere, anytime, then of course Voltron can happen.
Yeah.
So we just got to make it happen.
Yeah. And it's not easy. It's really not easy. I mean, it's just so, even again, just everything I've recounted about Voltron of it could have been dead on arrival. It could have, all kinds of things could have happened. The music might not have been so interesting. The voice acting might have been a little lackluster. You can take any of those elements, any two of those elements would really, make it flat. So, but making a movie, when you think about, all the stuff that just has to go on and just get right, it's, you want to be good, but you also got to be lucky. Meaning the right people are available to do things at the right time, and timing is such an impact on stuff, especially with movies. I was involved in one movie in my life, and it just was like, wow, it takes too long. The gestation period of movies is like, oh boy, at least, at that time when I was more in television, like, and listen, Voltron was, 5 episodes a week. Let's get going. Come on, everybody. Let's get going. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah.
That was much more my, the tempo that I enjoyed. So,
you've done a lot of things with the live broadcasts and stage shows and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How does that, compared to actually doing a episodic type of thing?
Well, it's obviously very different. I mean, episodic, has its own rhythm, but it's episodic. You got to have a pace. That's sort of what gives it an energy. So, you can't do a couple episodes and then sort of slow down and okay, a couple weeks later do a few more. You really want to, and everybody realize, it's a funny thing about, all of us, even in the plant world, living things under stress actually, rise up to something else, and it's probably crazy of me to say, but, there's a lot that, those of us in the entertainment business like about that stress. I have a lot of gray hair from my young age, but they're all hard earned. But there is a certain thing to that. It's like, yeah, it's, I'm really in a groove here. We're really happening. And it's sort of, I used to call it maintain an even strain. You want to sort of get going, you want to maintain an even strain and sort of keep going. But, the stuff about, either live shows that I've done, that's a rush. I mean, when I was doing, I was very involved in a series called Live by Request on A&E Network, where we had, big name performers come in and perform 2 hours live, and it was a call-in request show. And it wasn't Stump the Band. Nobody, it wasn't like we were, somebody's gonna come in and say, oh, play Misty for me to, Phil Collins or something. Like what? Everybody that came on, they knew and they were also, we had phone people that just their whole job was to chat up the callers to make sure, one, they weren't, a little out of their minds or going to be a little crazy. And the other was that they knew what they wanted to talk about. But when we faded up and the band started and everything was going, and 2 hours went by like in 10 minutes. And after that show, with every episode we did like 22 of them, I think. And it was like, wow, when it was over, it was like, we all knew we did something, and it was live. You were hearing real people calling in and saying, a woman called in, Phil Collins, I don't know if you know his song, Two Hearts. And she called in and, she said, Phil, I've listened to you and, my whole life. And I just want you to know, I had a miscarriage and, and she was this whole thing. And she said, but now my husband and I, and now we're having twins. Could you sing Two Hearts for me? And even now I'm getting chills. And Phil was just like, I mean, he couldn't even start the song, but that was the stuff that went on. We're like, it takes your breath away. It's like, wow, there was somebody out there that made that connection. And we had, a million and a half people watching. So we knew that, it was really touching people and stuff. So, and I've done a lot of other concerts of, the Rolling Stones and Mariah Carey and, some heavy metal stuff. And I did Up in Smoke with Dr. Dre and Eminem. And those were recorded and edited. So they had their own, process, I'll call it. And, listen, what's really interesting, when you deal with talent, real talent, at the end of the day, and this is sort of applying more to the music side, artists do things the rest of us can't or don't or won't, right? They're disconnected in ways, and the reason they can write a story in 2.5, 3 minutes, the reason they can play something like other people can't or won't, and the reason we pay them handsomely is because they do things that the rest of us can't or won't. And in the end of the day, true artists have to make art. They just have to. And we can all talk about, oh, they're so crazy, they're this, they're that. But everyone I've worked with, Mariah Carey, I mean, Mick and Keith, they are, we see them as rock and rollers. We see her as a diva. But in all the meetings I was in with them, because in the end of the day, I was doing television or home video or web or wireless, and they knew this was going to be around longer than they were going to be alive. So they were going to leave something behind for as many concerts as they did and as many people as they played to. The stuff I was doing and others, whoever recorded concerts too, that stuff was going to be around. They wanted to make sure it was going to be a lasting memory of them. So they were very serious about it and very businesslike. So as crazy as we can think some of them are, the true artists really, want to be true to their art form, and they want it represented well. So it was always exciting, and it was also a bit pressured. I mean, there was stuff on, the Rolling Stone stuff. We were sending mixes back and forth. It wasn't right. It wasn't right. You're like, oh my gosh, Up in Smoke. I was in a recording studio with Dr. Dre till 4 a.m, and we had a private plane standing by to take the master to the DVD replication facility in Huntsville, Alabama, to make delivery.
Wow.
But you have to. In my part of the world, sometimes I'm the guy that stands between Martians and Earthlings. It's artists and business people. And I had business people on that particular project. Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? And then I'd have to sit with Dre, and we were in the studio on Up in Smoke. And I would say, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It was Dr. Dre, Eminem, Snoop Dogg. It was the the greatest of the time. We shot it on 35mm film, which nobody wanted to do at the time. Like, oh my God, why spend all that money on a rap hip hop, production? And it was, my thing was, because if you shoot it on, regular stuff, it'll be the difference of people will say, hey, can you bootleg me a copy of that? If you treat it like a film, somebody will say, I got to go buy that. And it worked, and it really worked well.
And in hindsight, you future-proofed it as well.
Yeah,
I mean, anything shot on video is now, if it's not HD, you don't see it on a lot of services.
Yeah, it doesn't upconvert well. Yeah, exactly. Right, yeah. And so we're in a studio, and there is I've got a private plane waiting to fly this master. We're cutting it that close. And Dre is looking through stuff and going, wait, I gotta overdub this. And I'm like, Dre, listen, because if we miss delivery, we had an exclusive with Best Buy at the time when Best Buy was, selling DVDs. And if we missed that delivery, Dr. Dre himself was going to be on the line for all the costs of advertising that was now not correct, all these other things. It was really substantial. And anyways, he looked at stuff in there and he said, I got to overdub this. I'm like, oh my gosh, you can't be doing that. What are you doing? And he looked at me and said, Steve, look at this. Just look at this scene. And what was happening is, in the concert, there were these pockets of people that had been lit. And when everybody's, going, and you could see these people, they were, singing to the song, but you couldn't hear them. and he
Ah,
thought we should hear them. And he was, and
ah.
so he said, "Oh, you watch this and you tell me if you think I'm right." And I'm like, "Okay, you're right. You're right." And like that, he had 20 people come in the studio at like 3 in the morning. And they all crammed into this recording booth, a vocal recording room. And he showed them the scenes. It was just certain scenes. He went right through the scenes, just those scenes. He went through them with them. And then he looped them like 5 times, right? 20 people 5 times is suddenly 100 voices. And he did that. And they did it like this. It was impressive. And they did the final mix down. And I would just like, and I walked out of the studio at like 6 in the morning, went to the Burbank airport, got on this plane, and was just like, and went to Huntsville, Alabama, and said, "Okay, here it is." And even now, you watch it, you don't necessarily hear it so well, but I'll always continue to feel it. But those are the kind of examples where you just go, "Oh my God, oh my God." And then, you go with an artist and their instincts and their sensibilities, and you can't go wrong. And what I've also learned is if you have an artist that doesn't like what you did with their stuff, you got nothing, right? So if you don't support what they're doing, and I don't take a stand against my business people about, "Oh my God, you went over budget, you ran late," on behalf of the artist, then if you don't have the artist on board, you got nothing. If they don't want to talk about, this was really cool, we're really glad we did this, kind of stuff, you really don't have anything. You have to have something that they feel good about too. It's not, you can't sort of rip the baby out of their bosom and then say, "Oh, I'll take it from here." You got to be collaborative, and you got to make sure that they feel their art form is being respected. So that's a different kind of pressure than a 2-hour live show, or trying to deliver 125 episodes in record time or something. So
Yeah, you have to respect their legacy, and this is
Yeah.
part of the whole package for them.
Yeah, no, it's really true, Mark. Yeah.
Which is why, Greg, we respect the legacy of Voltron on this podcast.
Oh, there we
And
go.
we respect all the people that have ever been involved with Voltron, so that we can really get to know what this true legacy of Voltron really is.
Yeah,
So,
it's amazing what you guys are doing, because I wasn't so hip to it for a while, and as I looked into it, it's like you're really carrying the mantle of this, and it's really cool, and you're just so sincere and authentic, and really scratching beneath the surface. On some hand, I'm sort of humbled of like, "Geez, Greg, I don't really remember that. I'm not really sure." And you guys are sort of
Right.
going back, and even going into Indianapolis for VoltCon, I was like, I got to brush up on stuff. I don't know if I killed those brain cells or not. I really got to remember I mean, there are the things like I've talked about tonight they're in me forever. I could, be on my deathbed and still recount some of this, because it was so wonderful and so intense, and so special. And, just, again, we didn't know we were making something special, but we were trying to make something special. And just the act of trying spawned some things out of it that might not have happened otherwise. So yeah, it's great that you guys are keeping this legacy alive. And I think that, as things about Voltron go on, I think you guys are really the ones that are sort of keeping the flame alive, that people will say, the next Voltron that comes out in whatever form it comes out,
Right.
will be something that everybody go, "Wow, there's so much more to this." And it's a credit to everybody, and just the whole VoltCon thing that those guys put together is so impressive. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks so much for the kind words, and very kind of you to say we help to keep the thing alive, but you and so many other talented people brought it to life to begin with, from Toei Animation delivering
Yeah.
the original anime productions, to all of the various people working at or for World Events Productions, directly or indirectly, to bring the show into fruition and bring it to television sets around the world and into the imaginations and memories of so many people of all ages. It's a major tip of the hat to you and everyone else who
Well,
made
yeah,
that
thank you
happen.
for that. Yeah, thanks. And it's always amazing to me. All these years later, I could be in somebody's office somewhere or something, and if I just, oh yeah, I was on Voltron, people, Voltron, what it really, you say Voltron, it connected, and I have to say, it was something about VoltCon that really, as I say, that humbled me when, I had various people come up to me and say, it wasn't really because of me, but because of the show and the characters. I had people come up to me and say, this Voltron, like Princess Allura. I had somebody come up to me and say, Princess Allura really made me realize I could be me. Now, how old was that person when they were watching Voltron that saw a female superhero character that they sort of felt like, wow, I can be somebody, I can do something, and that's the kind of stuff you can't plan on doing that. And that's, that happened half a dozen times at VoltCon. I would just like it really took me aback. I really was humbled by that, to think, wow, that really, I just thought we were sort of, entertaining kids, and they were, yelling at the TV and going out and chasing each other with sticks and swords and stuff. And, but that kind of stuff, you go, wow, that's really important. It really, it really did something.
It is remarkable the impact that each and every one of us can have on other people's lives, just in ways that we cannot possibly fathom and understand. So for you to have heard some of those stories, that must have been really rewarding. How amazing.
It really was, still to this day. Yeah.
We have a lot of artists out there today making things that are current, and then there's some of those things that are reboots of the originals, right? Mm-hmm. And I see those people remarking about, it's like one of the greatest joys of my life to be able to work on a new version of that thing that I enjoyed as a kid when I was young. So those types of things really mean a lot to those artists who are currently working on those current projects. Mm-hmm. So it's terrific to see that people are so inspired by things that they grew up with.
It really is. And, you mm-hmm. don't really know what that is going to be at the time. And you don't know how it comes out the other end. You see something at a certain age at a certain time, and then all of a sudden it could be a year or two later. It's like, oh, what about this? What about that? Yeah, it's really true. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful thing about that stuff, where you can sort of, touch somebody in some way that maybe even comes out later.
Yeah, I mean, and entertainment is an industry. It's a business. There's the nuts and bolts of making it, and of course, there's a creative aspect that goes to it, the artistry. There's also, when all the pieces line up, there's a sort of magic that happens, and for that to touch the lives of so many of the people who experience it, that's something you can't engineer. It just happens, and what an amazing thing.
Yeah, no, it really is. And listen, there's all kinds of examples of you listen to, again, recording artists that have the biggest #1 hit in the world, and when you listen to them say, I had no idea when we were making this that it was going to do that. Nobody in any creative endeavor can ever be sure what's going to come of it. They all talk about, I don't care, screenwriters, film directors, music artists, and TV producers, directors. Nobody knows what's really going to come of something. Then it takes on a life of its own, and when it does something that really makes it special. And of course, that's what makes entertainment so interesting and perilous and fraught with all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to your point, Greg, it's really nobody can be sure about any of it. I was on the phone yesterday with somebody who was telling me, oh, it'll never work, it'll never ever work. And I didn't want to be disrespectful. I'm like, how can you say something will never work? I mean, how many people have been told something will never work, and then suddenly they just keep at it? Could be 10 years later, something comes of it. And this person was in the entertainment business, like, wow, that's pretty amazing. And I wanted to actually be a smarmy and say, well, now that you can be so certain about what won't work, could you just focus on telling me what will work so we can really make some money? And but yeah, nobody knows what will work, and nobody can say something won't work. And that's part of the message of all of this is, you have an idea, you have a passion, you got to pursue it, because it's passion and perseverance is everything. I don't care what it is and what field. Doesn't have to be in the entertainment field, but whatever you are thinking about or dreaming about or envisioning, you have to have passion and perseverance, and really pursue it, because eventually you can get there. You can either will it to happen, or you can be at the right place at the right time and wanting it to happen. And it's a really important thing to realize about all of that.
Are there any current passions that you're currently working on that you want to promote?
I'd say nothing I could promote that anybody can go do now. I'm working on these guys out of London. We're working on a tour for the fall called iMagician, a total play off of, iPhone, everything, because he's a very, lasers and holograms. He does stuff with cell phones in the audience. There's a guy named Jamie Allen. He's extraordinary. He's, Penn and Teller call him the greatest technology magician they've ever seen. And so we're just in the process of putting a US tour together in the fall. So yes, I'd love everybody to look out for iMagician in the fall. We've got different bookings going on and stuff. But I mean, on a pure entertainment standpoint, there's this some of the hologram stuff is still, we're hoping to open a hologram dinosaur project at the Houston Museum of Natural Science sometime this summer. We've been working on that, so that'll get interesting if we can really once we get it opened. It's using basically hologram projections to show dinosaurs in 3D.
Oh wow!
It'll make a lot of stuff accessible. It's not going to take an $80 million movie to do that. So if that's now just sort of coming through the process. So those are the only two things really.
Well, they both sound fascinating. Thanks for
Yeah.
telling us about them.
Looking forward to seeing news about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
is there anything that you want to promote from a social media type of thing, like where people could see where you're posting things or anything like that?
No, I pretty much move around on as much stealth as I possibly can.
I understand. I understand.
I'm much happier being a person behind the scenes and then in front of the scenes. You can't imagine how nervous I was before you guys came on tonight. You go, oh my gosh.
It's good.
No, I've always preferred being behind the scenes. I like it, and I'm more comfortable that way. And as I say, I work with a lot of different very talented people, and they're the ones who make magic happen literally and figuratively or artistically. So
yeah,
I'm much better at carrying their things forward than standing in front of the scene myself. But thank you for that. Yeah,
no problem. All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us on Let's Voltron, the official Voltron podcast.
A real pleasure, Mark and Greg. Thanks for taking good care of me and all the discussion tonight. And I hope I don't make too much of an editing challenge for you to cut all this down into something.
Not at all.
No,
not at all.
Not at all. We really appreciated having you on. So thanks again.
Yeah, no, great being with you guys. Really enjoyed it. And again, thanks for carrying the legend of Voltron forward and keeping the legacy of Voltron alive like this. It's very cool what you're doing. So keep it up. And if there's anything I can do to help with it further, let me know.
Oh, well, thank you. And we'll see you all next time on
Let's Voltron!